Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Development Hell Podcast, the Movie Club. And we're back at it again, and we're talking about American Psycho, which is a 2000 horror thriller starring Christian Bale from director Mary Harron, based off of the book of Bret Easton Ellis, which I know a few of you have read, which I also heard is considerably more disturbing than the movie, which is saying a lot. But we have Joe, Matt, Vinnie, and Jim here to talk about American Psycho. So, right off the bat, before we get into everybody's general thoughts, I think I know the answer to this, but Matt, are we bringing Patrick Bateman to Applebee's with us?
Hell no. Hell no, we are not bringing. Could you imagine? Because it wouldn't be.
Would he even step foot in Applebee's?
No,
exactly. He's getting reservations at that fancy restaurant.
Dorcia.
Would you bring him to Dorcia? That's the question.
Or he's probably going to go to Applebee's, telling his date that it's Dorcia's.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? All he could get into was Applebee's that night. It's like, we went to Dorcia. It's like, did you now? But yeah, I feel like we're going back to our roots from when we started. And every single protagonist of our movies were absolutely despicable. So, make him full circle. But one person who wasn't there at the beginning, but has become a great addition to the show. Now, Joe, what are your general thoughts on American Psycho?
So, we talked about it earlier, my love for spoilers and just jumping right into it. I'm going to hold back. I'm going to restrain myself just a smidgen.
We'll get to specific details. Yeah. And if we really want to start at the end and then make our way back to the beginning, we could do that. But what are just your general thoughts?
So I always like to start off with when I write in my journal, what comes out to me, the general things. I always choose a quote, and the one quote I wrote was the one where he says, "I like to dissect girls. Did you know I am utterly insane?" Just in the context of him even saying it to me, I was like, that's the quote that for some reason stuck to me. The other one being the videotapes, going back, returning his videotapes.
Videotapes. Which is where Alex is tonight, which is why he could not join us.
Yeah. And I mean, what I wrote down too was that this is mostly a character study of a messed up individual. What does blow my mind about this movie, every time I watch it, I'm always fooled that this movie wasn't made in the 80s. I always believe that this movie was made in the 80s. The quality of the film looks like it was made in the 80s. And to me, it's like, no, that can't happen, because I've seen Christian Bale in Newsies, and he was a kid then, and he's closer to Batman's age. So this has to be around the 2000s. So this can't be a movie made in the 80s. To me, they capture, this is probably and I guess it kind of makes sense too, because the time period's not that far apart from the 80s that they're going to have, film stock that you can use to capture that look, right? That it wouldn't be too far out of the realm. But that attention to detail really gives that film that extra panache that adds to what this story is about, which is, the 80s culture and kind of how it relates to the characters. And, going back on it being about a messed up individual, I think, when I was reading up to about this movie being made, there was a lot of talk. From what I was researching, they wanted to really capture that this is a movie about privilege. You have a character that is essentially doing things that most other people would not be able to get away with. And it kind of reminds me of a quote from a TV show called You, where main character in that show, he's a sociopath. But in an interview, he mentioned how he gets away with his things. And he says, well, when you look the way that I look, that you kind of get a pretty privilege and get away with certain things that I feel like really captures and really drives home what works in this film. And I'm wondering if that's something you guys also felt as well when watching the movie.
We trust this white man. He wouldn't do us wrong.
Honestly, Willem Dafoe is easily and I love this movie, but he's the worst detective. Every single time he says something incriminating, and then Patrick the color drains out of his face, and he starts not really stuttering, but it's like he starts to like get really like quiet, and then he starts looking around the room. Come on, obviously he did.
I mean, who's a better liar, Patrick Bateman or Amber Heard?
Oh my.
Okay.
So Matt, what are your general thoughts of American Psycho?
There's no comments under your video. To turn them
on. Come on, everyone believes she pooped the bed.
She literally shit the bed. But Matt, what are your general thoughts?
General thoughts. That's wild. I love this guy. That's what. General thoughts. Okay. This movie is funny. If you can take violence and if you can see past what looks like misogyny and it's actually just satire, then like this movie is really, really funny. If you can take like, if you're a fan of like the most deepest like gallows and like black humor possible, then like that, like this movie will kind of like you'll get it. Like you'll just get it. I think that in an interesting way, I was thinking a lot about like other movies that have I guess main characters that are very, very sick. And I was thinking of Clockwork Orange. And I remember I remember like listening to like a review about A Clockwork Orange being kind of like about what a cautionary, because it's supposed to be set in the future, right? But then regardless of whether it's set in the future, it's like this thing where it's kind of like, this is what, if we don't have like safeguards on our ids, on our impulses, this is what we would look like. But Patrick Bateman, like he exists in a world where it's kind of like, that's very, very much like our own, that's set in kind of like sort of kind of like current day. And he isn't like a cautionary thing. He is like the embodiment of kind of like, I guess what like the author felt like either what we were or what we currently are, which is disturbing in a sense. It's pretty bleak that he thinks that that's kind of like what maybe like what we all are on the inside. So that's, I don't know, that's a random thing. Oh, and then also so I've seen this movie multiple times, and like the 80s stuff, I like what Joe was talking about. There's a lot of really interesting 80s stuff. Someone please tell me, when did Ferris Bueller's Day Off come out?
86.
Okay, so then
or was it maybe it was 84? I don't know.
Okay.
88.
It wasn't
86.
It was 86. Okay, because he gives one of the sex workers a robe, and it's the robe, and it's like the black, it's the red and gray and black like striped robe that Ferris was wearing. He shoos away. He cuts the meeting with Willem Dafoe short and says that I have a meeting with Cliff Huxtable, which really makes me laugh. And then there's like the stuff about the cocaine, and there's Reagan. Also, this is the random. So it's very 80s. Like not just it exists beyond just like the music and like the weird looking suits. Those suits are so weird. Like so, I think they look weird to me. But then the last thing, this is not even so much like observation. It's just really funny, at least to me anyway. When Patrick is doing cocaine and he's with his friend, and he's like freaking out about some other guy that's doing cocaine in the stall next to him, and he's like, "Sorry, Patrick, it's the steroids." I'm like, damn, like how many drugs is this guy on? I don't know. This movie's funny to me.
I noticed that too. Like it was, yeah.
Hey, what the hell? Yeah. Is this guy okay?
No, he's obviously not.
The business card scene did crack me up.
Oh, we'll definitely get to that, because like I feel like that's like one of the most iconic parts in this movie is that dick measuring contest over who has the best business card.
I have a lot I want to add to that as well too. That supports my theory.
But Vinnie, what are your general thoughts?
All right. Well, I'm sorry if your podcast receives some hate mail from this, but I didn't. It was my second time seeing it, and I don't know the first time. Well, all right. I mean, the first time I watched it, I watched it. I wasn't really giving it much thought. I really wasn't even that into it, just because I just wasn't really like I guess, paying attention to too much. But I don't know. So much of this movie rubbed me the wrong way, and I don't know if it was because I started watching some of it with Matt, then after, like, when we got back after Shane's wedding. And then I watched the rest of it when I got home. So I don't know if I was just in a sour mood because it was the end of a fun weekend, but I don't know. Like, I didn't like it. I mean, granted, Christian Bale was great. I thought he was a terrific mix of your like typical like Wall Street guy, and then just like the overall creepiness of Patrick Bateman. There are a couple of good scenes, like we mentioned the business card scene a couple minutes ago, but just all in all, I didn't care for it. I mean, like, I don't mind if a movie is mean spirited, but this really was just like a little too much for me. I like a lot of it, like pretty much all the supporting characters. I just didn't think there was really anything to them there really wasn't anything to them at all. And like, I don't know, for me anyway, like the movie, it really just kind of came down to like, oh, what's reality and what's in his imagination. I just really, I don't know. I just didn't care for it. Again, I'm sorry.
No, you have to apologize. I think this is a type of movie that is divisive, and will test. It's like, when anyone says, queasy for blood for certain things, it's like sometimes you just can't control a bodily reaction to something. If it just turns you off, it turns you off.
Some of the things I heard were in the book. I'm glad they didn't add that into this movie. But
I'm sorry, I should say, and just I never read the book, so I mean, like, I can't. So I obviously I'm only going off of like what I saw in the movie. I don't know like how it compares to the book, so I'm just putting it out. I'm just putting it out there.
All I'm gonna say is I heard about a rodent in the book, and I'm really glad if that was as detailed to me that somebody told me that. I'm glad that wasn't in the movie, because I think that would have been a step too far. But Jim, what are your thoughts on the film?
So I finally did my reading
Yep.
for this film, and I'm not glad that I did. I think scarring is one word that comes to mind. I get it. I was talking about the book to somebody the other day, and I think what I said was, after stuttering for a while, I accept the thesis of the book. I don't think all the grisly detail of the murders and rape and whatever was all necessary. So I appreciate the movie after reading the book, doing a lot of that off screen. Like, it wasn't all just right there. So by comparison, the movie's pretty tame. I can say that a lot of the dialogue for the movie is directly from the book. I know that Easton Ellis worked on the screenwriting team, so like it's pretty true to like his vision. I thought it made a lot more sense in the film. Like, for example, one thing I want to talk about is like the music. There were 3 kind of bizarre, fully thought out reviews in the book, and I was like, where is this coming from? And it's still completely insane in the film, but in the context of what he's doing and what he's talking about, it makes it completely insane, which is perfect. I want to talk about the music. Yeah, Joe.
I wanted to bring that up too, because the songs that he's reviewing are not really like classic songs. They're pop music. They're just general pop music. They're good pop music, but they're considerably, what people would call junk food music. Not like
popcorn. Yeah,
popcorn music. Like, and he's giving these well thought out reviews of it. Like, and to me, what it was is when he's talking about Phil Collins, he's talking about what every person who talks about Genesis, the complete opposite of what people talk about when it comes to Genesis.
All I want to say is that Joe's thoughts on Phil Collins are not shared by everybody on the movie.
Oh, I like Phil Collins, but I mean,
I like Whitney.
Yeah.
they're popcorn for a reason. It's enjoyable, it's satisfying, but I mean, you know, it's still popcorn.
I have a theory here. If we just want to open up from here, like a lot of the what struck me in the beginning of the movie, he's describing like and in the book this happens too. He goes into very exhaustive detail on the names that everybody's wearing in the room, like Armani this, blah blah blah, what kind of purse she was wearing, all the like names, very expensive names, and then all the skincare products and his routine that he goes through. So to me, it was like, this is the mask that he's putting on for society, because like inside he's dead. Like, you know what I mean? So my only theory on this, the pop songs, is that like, it's also very, like, it's not important music, debatably, Shane. Like, it's very, it's popcorn music. Pop music is not the kind of thing that's supposed to have like a lasting legacy. You know what I mean? They're not great albums that are going to be talked about for, I think that's debatable, because Whitney Houston's had a great career after whatever album that was he brought up in the movie, right? But that's my only theory as to those bizarre screeds that he goes off on about like his musical opinions.
I do have a lot of, we can start there, but I want to give my quick, like, general thoughts too. Of like, I feel like this is a really interesting and well thought out and presented just critique on Reagan era America.
Yeah.
And it is so detailed, and they just capture so much about it. And I do have to say, I felt when the credits started rolling, especially the third time watching it, I felt like it went a bridge too far in trying to be like, what's really going on? And I'm just like, at the end, I'm just like, especially after like the lawyer's like, you're blah, 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 blah. And then he goes, sits down with his friends, and they're like, oh, Bateman. And it's just like, I don't even know if the movie knows what's true or not. And I feel like a tiny bit cheated by the end. But like, I do think it's compelling and interesting and crazy to watch. This is quite the hour and 42 minutes to watch. And I think the biggest thing is like, this is the Christian Bale show from start to finish. And like, obviously there's some named people in this movie, like Willem Dafoe's in here, Reese Witherspoon, and like Josh Lucas and Justin Theroux throw in there. And of course,
Gavin Belson looking like a Batman villain.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Chloe Sevigny, and of course Jared Leto.
Another Batman, an actual Batman villain.
So it's a very interesting cast for 2000, and like going to like the music, and I think that was actually the thing that stuck out to me the most this third time watching it is I think his obsessive dissection of this music is who he really is. Like, he puts on all these facades. Like, when it really comes down to it, all he seems to really care about is his music. And I think his critique of some of the music says a lot about who he is. And I think the one sequence where he's talking about Phil Collins, and he's like, Genesis, I just didn't get it before Phil Collins. I'm like, I think he's admitting on some level he's not as smart as he presents himself to be. And I think that there's a lot of, I might be reading into this too much, but I feel like a lot of what he's saying when he's talking about that music is him kind of showing his hand of like his own perceptions of maybe who he is. And that is potentially why when they make those comments of like Bateman's such a, just like a worm and stuff like that. And maybe he's on some dark level acknowledging the fact that like he's not who he really presents himself to be, and who the film is presenting him to be to us. And it's interesting how he's talking about Huey Lewis in the news. He's like, they started with the new wave sound, and I never really connected to that. And because like the new wave was supposed to be like this new experimental shift in terms of music in the 80s, but he, with their album Sports, which it's like when they really go like what Huey Lewis in the news really sounds like to most people. And it's like, it's interesting that like that's when he started loving it. And I feel like he's being his most raw, and especially in the scene about the Whitney Houston thing, because he's being uncomfortably like obsessive and raw and distant in that moment, talking about Whitney Houston with like the two women just there, and he seems so off. And then of course she starts like negging him about liking Whitney Houston, and he just completely ignores her and just keeps talking about Whitney Houston. I feel like on some level it's like that's like the cracks of like showing like maybe this is who he really is, because all the other time like he's talking to the audience, like putting on this whole facade about everything. And you know, he shows a couple of different times like breaking down and really like, yeah, I don't think Bateman's as calm, cool, and like this confident person as he makes us all think he is. But I don't know. Those are just some of the things that are popping into my head sitting there listening to him obsessively talk about music.
Yeah.
Well, I did get something. Sorry, Vinny, go ahead.
Well, like I'm wondering now, I know the whole thing is that like he starts talking about like one thing that's supposed to get you nervous is that, you know, he starts talking about music before he's going to kill someone. But on a deeper level, I'm thinking, you know, like what you guys were saying about how, like, you know, his obsession with music and him talking about it is like, as Shane said, him showing his hand. And I'm thinking like, you know, like maybe like his obsession with music is also, it's also kind of him showing his sensitive side. Like, cause like whenever he talks about music, I mean, as far as I can remember, he never talks about it outside the confines of like his apartment. Like you know, his apartment is like his private space. He's pretty much like, I guess like you could almost say he's like burying his soul in some way, like within those walls. Like within those walls is who he can kind of show who he really is. Like he can't, like you can say maybe he's too scared to show who he really is to his friends, like when he's in the workspace or out in like a public setting.
And not just scared, I think he just gets ignored. I think ultimately he gets passed off and he gets ignored. That's why my favorite quote is when he's talking about dissecting people. People are just assuming he's talking about something else, or they completely pass it off. And I mean, it also goes back to a scene that we're probably going to talk about too, with those business cards, right? If you really think about it, right, you have all these guys doing this dick measuring with these business cards. He's the first one to show his card, thinking he's got the best thing on the lot, but then everybody else overshadows him. Like, to me, that pretty much justifies. Yeah.
Do they though, or is that just his imagination?
Oh, no.
Because they all look the same.
In his mind,
let's be honest,
he's less inferior about this, and to them, they probably don't give a shit. They're just cards. No, sorry for the language, but like, you know, I don't think to add to that. It seems like they don't really care, but in his mind, this is the greatest thing that they got, and you know, it just shows like when he showed his first card, he's thinking it's good, but then like it further like buries the hatchet, or like buries the knife into him when it's not as good as he thinks it is. Because I think ultimately I remember there being like when they're taking out the cards, and then like I remember there's like one point where like I don't know if it's like I know he goes first, and then there's one guy goes next, and then I don't know if it's like maybe the next person or the person after that, but there's like at one point like Patrick, like his face almost like cracks. He's like let's see his card. Like it's like he's like there's like a split second where like he almost like loses, like I guess loses control, and then he quickly composes himself and says, let's see his card. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day,
yeah.
It totally goes back to what you were saying, Shane, about the Reagan era, where, you know, finding meaning in material and thinking that if you have the biggest car or the nicest house, or that song goes where as the days go on. No. where, you know, it's all about having the nicest stuff, but ultimately, why even do it if it's not going to really make you happy? And I think he tries so hard to cling on to these things, but ultimately he has no attachment to anything. And the only thing he can really be attached to is his fascination with murder, his fascination with gore, his fascination. And to me, it really just sticks to just being a fascination with violence, a fixation on violence. He's listening to screams. His favorite movie, he likes to reenact Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I think is such a great inclusion, because that movie really did, in my mind, reinvent the slasher genre in a sense. You know, the production to that movie is friggin' insane. But overall, like, you know, that being his fixation and fascination, right? It's the only thing to me, it seems like that gives him like a meaning or like a purpose. To me, though, it sounds like, I don't know. I want to know if everybody else feels that he actually killed anybody.
Well, you know, it's funny. It's funny you bring up the Texas Chainsaw Massacre because in that movie, it was early 70s, very low budget, and like the graininess of it, like just like that, those details made the movie feel like, for lack of a better word, like dirty.
I felt like I was going crazy. I remember watching that on Halloween. I felt like I was going crazy, like right. Characters go in that movie going crazy. Like that scene with the dinner where they're all at that dinner table. I felt like I was legitimately at the Mad Tea Party from hell.
Right. And when I say dirty, I don't mean like adult oriented. I just mean dirty as
physically
in, like,
unclean.
Right.
Like it's just gritty and you can see like the
right. And then seeing Patrick Bateman come down the hallway with a chainsaw, and you know that scene especially, you can debate like whether or not it's real or imagined. I really think it's imagined, because come on, who does?
Well, no one's at the doors. There's nobody in the whole flat, and you know.
But I mean, but still, like at the same time, you know, it is like, you know, a very, very dark way of showing you know, here, like, you know, here's like this very, like, you know, here's like a very like upscale civilized part of New York City, but you see this man running down the hallway with a chainsaw, and like it's, you know, it's a very jarring thing to have someone, you know, to have someone with a chainsaw of all things running down the hallway of like an upscale apartment.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I completely agree. I was laughing because the jarring is like, that's like a tame word for how I would react if I saw that. I think, Shane, I like what you were talking about with the music. I guess the thing that I was thinking about is that, so specifically with The Greatest Love of All, I forget what he said about like the other two songs, the other two artists or albums or that he was dissecting, but The Greatest Love of All, it's interesting because the thing that he finds most powerful about that song in particular is that, like, because that song basically is about like finding like empathy, like finding the importance of empathy, and then looking into yourself and like loving yourself, and then kind of like, and then being able to like, spread that around. It's interesting that he says he's so moved by that, but I don't think he really gets it though. It's almost kind of like if somebody were to talk about, someone online said something like, there's a big difference between somebody that has seen a movie a bunch of times and can quote every single piece of it, like let's say like Iron Giant. Like I know every single character and every single line of the Iron Giant, but that person might not get like the true meaning of the fact that movie is about like, what if a gun had a soul? Like it's a different thing to like understand something in one way versus a different way. I feel like Patrick Bateman only really understands it more than surface level, but not to an extent where he can really connect with it and then like learn from it.
You know what? Also,
yeah. So
to add to that too,
talking about. Yeah. What happened? Yeah.
Does it also kind of remind you of that scene in Joker when he's at the club and he's at the lounge and he's studying the comedian, and every time he's laughing, it's when there's nothing funny going on.
Yeah, exactly. There's like it's like, oh, okay, there's a disconnect.
There's a clear disconnect. Yeah.
Yeah, like he's trying. Like I feel like with the music, he's trying, and he's not even confident with it, because when Willem Dafoe like brings up like Huey Louie in the News, like he like lies and said like, I've never heard of that album, or I've never heard of that art. I don't like that artist. So I don't know. It's just interesting. I feel like he simultaneously wants to be, I guess, quote unquote normal, but also he doesn't care. And actually, Vinny, I'd actually be curious to know like how you feel about this part. I don't fault him or the other characters for being like thinly written, I guess, in a certain way, because every time I see this movie, I always think that's like the point. Like he's supposed to be, he and everybody else are supposed to be kind of like they're so shallow that like things that interest them aren't like the genocide and whatever the hell they're talking about at that dinner scene, but instead like business cards. Like that's the thing that kind of like makes them go like, whoa. Like, so like in that sense, yeah, how do you feel about that? Like they're supposed to be thin, or you feel like it's a cop-out answer?
Well, you know what? I do agree with what you're saying, and yeah, I mean, I do understand that was supposed to be the point with the Wall Street characters, but I mean, I don't know, like it just, for me, like it just got to a point where like there wasn't really like any depth to like really any of the supporting characters, and I was at that point I was just like all I was thinking was I just want someone to have like I just want someone other than
you want
Patrick
to be more
Bateman.
like characters and not like cartoon, like flat cutout.
Yes.
I feel like I've met people, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I've met people that are like that flat. They're not fun to hang around.
I mean, that's people with personality. That's people with personality disorders. Well,
I feel like that. So, Joe, you just mentioned something I really want to talk about, because I know some of you guys have a background in psychology, right? One, I agree that they're supposed to be thin, not even thinly written, but they're supposed to be vapid, right? Like these Wall Street guys that get everything, they've gotten everything they could ever ask for, from Harvard Business School to these penthouse apartments. And there's this like ennui that comes with it, right? Where like nothing thrills them, nothing makes them happy. The only thing that they have to talk about even is what reservation they're going to have at what restaurant. And if it's not a hot restaurant, then it's embarrassing. You know what I mean? So like, I think they're definitely supposed to be thin characters. But then there's the possibility that Batman also, whatever his name is,
Bruce,
he only sees them this way. Like maybe he thinks he's the only interesting person in this cast, and that's the way he perceives these other people. I don't know, but I want to ask you guys about mental illness at some point. Shane, please go ahead.
Real quick, that's how I feel about it. I think everybody in this movie is his perception of how he thinks of all of them. And like, whether it's still something that as a viewer you could connect with or not, like Vinny, obviously you didn't feel that connection. You just want somebody to not be just a two-dimensional drawing of something. But like, I feel like we're in this whole entire movie is all about Bateman. It's his world, and these are the characters that he perceives in it, which is why he doesn't know people. He doesn't connect with people. So how would he be able to perceive a three-dimensional human being and present that to us, the audience, from his perspective? But I'm going to let Jim ask his question about mental illness, because I am not one of the people with a psych background, so I'm going to shut now.
I mean, you can still weigh in. You guys need to step up for this one, right?
We got to step up.
My biggest problem after reading like the book more than watching the movie is that he's kind of an amalgamation of like narcissism and like maybe dissociative personality disorder and maybe psychotic, but maybe also a sociopath. Like I can't really make heads or tails of like what his actual mental illness would be. And it's 20 years old, right? The book, and we weren't talking about mental illness in 1990 like we are today. I don't know. Did you guys have any thoughts about like, yeah?
Oh no, I was gonna say the movie's 20 years old. The book is about 30 years old.
But even then, yeah, that's like Joe, isn't that? That's like almost 3 DSMs ago, almost.
Exactly. I actually was thinking about purchasing the updated one for my sister, who she's starting her residency in psychiatry, and I was gonna, in her birthday's coming up, I was gonna get her the updated edition. While I stick with the older one, but yeah, like 3 DSMs ago. It's hard because like we can't really diagnose off of a movie, because especially with this movie, because his time frame is literally just a couple weeks, maybe about a month's time frame, which is kind of hard to really get when it comes to like a personality disorder. And I hate that I keep going back to it, and you guys are going to hate me for going back to it, but I think back to that Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial where the forensic psychologist mentioned that she came. I know it had to come back up, but when she came to her diagnosis, which ultimately was she's a paid expert to come in and do this evaluation, she had to spend like 12 hours and do like basically like 12 different tests to come to that diagnosis. And you could still argue that it's qualities of these disorders versus the actual disorder. And like you were saying, Jim, about there being multiple qualities there, that's definitely indicative that there could definitely be something underneath it. It's kind of hard to really say what that is, but you're definitely getting qualities and bits and pieces of it. What fascinates me the most, and I think this is why I'm leaning with everyone else that this is really all in his head, right? Is that I don't know if you guys would appreciate this analogy, but do you ever like watching TV shows where like in Always Sunny in Philadelphia, or even King of the Hill, where you get to that one episode where a character's imagining what his friends are thinking about or what they're doing in a situation, and their perception of how they view his friends are completely opposite to how they view each other. Like, you know, there's so many situations in this movie where it's a complete fantasy. Like there's no way you can say, maybe there's bits and pieces of what the truth actually is, but at the same time, it's just so overdone and so over the top that there's no way you could say that that's actually what's going on. And I know, Shane, you mentioned the ending could be a little, I think you said it was on the nose, right? Like a little too,
No, I said that it just didn't. I felt like it was like a bridge too far. It was trying to get too cute with itself to be like, hey, did this real, like, who is he really? And it's just like, okay, we get it.
I agree.
But like,
I think you're right. I think they could have. It could have maybe left it a little bit more, especially with the Reagan being on the TV screen. To me, that was kind of they didn't need that. And even like them talking about Reagan at the dinner. But to me, like, it is cool to see a character admit that Patrick Bateman is not really a special guy. He's not this character he's been made out to be in this whole movie, who's like, I just feel like you watch this movie, you think, he has such a high opinion of himself that it is kind of gratifying when someone's like, you're not the shit, dude. Like, just get over yourself. Just chill the F out, man. You're not that special.
Yeah, they keep calling him a dork, and it's like, you can call him a lot of stuff. That is
and you know what though? And to add to, like, if we're talking about psychopaths and like people who like go out, what do they always say about those people who go on to do those mass murders? What type of people are they?
They could be like anybody else.
They're the quiet ones.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Like like Jim, you're talking about like diagnoses. Like the one that's jumping out to me would be, even if none of this is real, I think maybe like one of the actually true, you could definitely point to this one thing being true is when his his receptionist or whatever is looking at his planner and seeing like the drawings that he has. So I do think that is true, even if other things weren't like the cop car exploding or
I agree with you there.
The janitor getting
that's his thought process.
Yeah, so I think that honestly, I mean, people shouldn't diagnose other people based on limited information because that's unethical. But this is a movie, so let's just do it because why not? Screw it, whatever.
Cold water effect, according to that psychologist.
Yeah, like I think, LOL. Like I think that he would probably be diagnosed with some kind of like an antisocial personality disorder because he like just the way that he has a hard time like connecting with other people, or that when he is connecting with people, it's like this. It's like this facade, and also the fact that he continually, because he says that he kills like 40 people, so it's not like the start of the movies when he started killing people. Like he's been doing this for a while, so like I think that would make it, I guess, like a trend and a pattern of behavior. I would say it would be antisocial personality.
This might seem a little random, Matt, because you did bring up this story to me, this Florida man story before about the man who murders his imaginary friend. Do you say that he actually murdered did he actually murder someone? Claims he did.
There was a story. Well, actually, never mind. I'll say that after we stop recording. It's a funny story that happened last week. But yeah, no, that's what I think. I think that because he can't, he either cannot or he either is unable to, I guess, like follow, I guess, like social norms, or it's not even that. It's not even kind of like me like guessing. He does actively go against what he's supposed to do to function in society. Yeah. Like, and I feel like, and I think it's interesting, even if maybe like other people like after the book came out and probably before have made the comparisons where it's kind of like, if you're that ambitious, there's probably something wrong with you. But like, it's interesting to kind of like that. Like when I saw this movie for the first time, I never had heard that quote where it's kind of like many CEOs of companies would probably like can probably be seen as like the like sociopath or something like that. You know what I mean? You guys have heard that, right?
Mark Zuckerberg.
or vice presidents of companies.
Yeah, like when you're that obsessive or you're that meticulous or you're that to the point where like you're not thinking about consequence, like moral things that we all think about, then yeah, it is arguable that there's something off. I want to stay away from saying wrong, but something is not congruent, as we would say. There's an incongruency.
Well,
I appreciate
pills, though. What does he take? What are those pills that he keeps taking? He's like down in like Tic Tacs. What the hell
That's
is
a good question.
Taking?
I'm gonna look and I'm gonna try to find out while Shane talks.
Yeah. What I was gonna say is, and I feel like to become so successful and so distant from most people in society, you have to be some form of divergent human being. So like there's not many people that become that, like if you think about like the Steve Jobs out there and the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musk, like there's something different about them. And some of them might be more predatory than others. Others can just be extremely charismatic, which is how they become in charge of like large groups of people and stuff like that. I feel like you have, especially in like this predatory like 80s era of business, you have to be some kind of cutthroat and ambitious human being. And it's very interesting when we talked about that Oliver Stone could have potentially made this film. He was lined up. It's like a strange combination of Wall Street and Natural Born Killers.
It really is.
At the same time.
And also you might as well throw the Wolf of Wall Street into the mix.
Well, and that's the thing too, because like this, like it's very different because like obviously this has like the horror elements and the serial killer stuff, but like this is like what Wall Street really is, except you have it for 3 hours and it's Martin Scorsese and it's a whole different other kind of energy about it. Mm-hmm. And this film, like, Patrick Bateman is some form of divergent human being that does not fit in to the basic standards and expectations of society. And I feel like on some level, he hopes that he could. And I think that's why he's so insecure and breaks down. Some of my favorite, and like, we haven't talked a whole lot about Christian Bale's acting.
Yeah.
Besides the fact that, like, it's amazing. But there's so many moments in this film that stick out to me because he's cracking and he's breaking. And it looks like the moment where he wants to strangle Gap from Silicon Valley.
Call him Enigma because he really looks like he looks like the Riddler.
And he like goes in the bathroom, he has the gloves on, and then I want to shout out my wife because when there's a tense moment between two men in a movie, she'll always be like, he should just quick peck right on the nose. And
she got really excited when that.
And when he kisses Patrick Bateman's hand, and you're just like, and you just see the look on Christian Bale's face because he broke. Like, Patrick Bateman broke. He's like, no compute anymore, and he's just standing there like, the look on his face, he's all sweaty. Like, Christian Bale sells it so well, and then he's like, I need to go return some videotapes. It's just like that. Whenever he breaks and can't handle the situation, like, that's his out. It's just like, safe word, goodbye, and gets out of there. But like, all those moments, and like when we're talking about the business card scene, and when one of them like plops that down and he has no other reaction to internally to be like, that is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And like, his reaction is like,
it's like that Jordan Peele meme where the sweat is dripping down.
Yeah. And he's just like, nice. And he kind of like retreats back into his shell because he's like, well, I am not winning this anymore. And like, it is funny from like probably all of our perspectives. It's like we're feeling like Mugatu being like, that business card, they're all the same card. And like, to us, it's like, we don't see the difference because like, this isn't as meaningful to us. But like, to them, they see the slight off-white coloring and the raised font size. And I just like, it's like, I got my business card in eggshell white with a slight raised Times New Roman font on it. It's just like, that's them in their element and just being absorbed by the excess. Because like, who gives a crap about a business card? You care about the info on it. Like, a normal person cares, can I read the person's name and phone number on it? But like, to them, it's status. It's just like, I can afford the best business cards, and that's how they measure themselves up against each other. And like, I just love all the moments in this film because like, yeah, Christian Bale's cool and confident and like the Bruce Wayne at moments, but he's at his best and most engaging when he is breaking.
Oh my God.
And he is vulnerable, and he just does not know how to compute the world around him.
That voicemail at the end, that's like some of, like, anytime I think of like a really good monologue, like in acting, like that's like one of the top, in my opinion, when he's just like, I killed a lot of people. That's, oh man, I love, every single time I watch this movie, like I always like, I'm excited to see him do that part. But then also I really like how he narrates, because there's a couple other times where I just like how he talks every once in a while, because for different reasons, like he's either like cracking or he's like really sure of himself, or he's like really, being really honest, but it's like really odd. But it's like in a funny way or in an awkward way, because he's kind of awkward sometimes. But damn, that ending scene where that end, one of the ending scenes where he's just ranting and confessing. He didn't even feel bad about it. He just feels bad that he's about to get caught.
I think, it's that thing that gives him a sense of control. I think when it comes to like what you were saying earlier about his disorder, is that there's that to it, it's about lack of control. When he has a lack of control, or he can't control the room, or he doesn't have that sense of control, he loses it. He breaks, because it's all about having a control over what's going on, and he tries so hard to do that when he can't actually do it. That's it is the fascinating bits, and it's a really good performance. I mean, it really showed why he was considered, why Batman was the next logical step after this. It makes sense. I would argue, it's a good performance. I mean, I think he's a great Batman. I think I would have loved to see him go a little bit more like in the movie, but and that's to each his own, I guess. But he's I don't he's just it's a portrayal of a guy who really sees himself so highly that when he's not actually doing anything meaningful or doing anything insightful, it really shows. I don't know.
I guess at this point, oh, Jim, you're on mute.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Yes.
Did this whole thing happen in my head? Okay. So where was I? Speaking of Wolf of Wall Street, all right, the drugs that I found are Valium, Xanax, and Halcyon, whatever the hell that is. I don't know what Halcyon is. But I was trying to say that
you found them on the ground. You found them on the ground?
That was straight from the pages of the Kindle. I like that we're talking about him, Patrick Bateman, as an individual, but kind of my follow-up from way back when is I kind of look at him as an analogy, no, more of a metaphor, that's what I mean, for the whole Gordon Gekko, greed is good, Wolf of Wall Street thing, right? Like that whole spirit is, to me, like unhealthy and unnatural and rife with like, I guess you could say mental illness, right? Narcissism, at least. So like, I don't know. You guys have said a lot of really interesting things that like we could totally extrapolate from the individual character study of a madman to like the culture. You know what I mean? So I think that's cool.
Society. But we all live in a society.
Exactly. Pretend it's a society. But can we talk about whether or not this is all in his head, or like fors and against? Because sometimes he's talking out loud and it's like nobody hears him. But then other times, like Matt said, the woman in his apartment picks up on the Whitney Houston thing, or like there are other times when he's talking out loud and people just dismiss what he has to say, but they hear him. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know if I totally buy into the.
I would agree with you there, Jim. I would say at the end of the day, truth is your reality. There's always going to be a sliver of the truth. There's going to be a sliver of reality. It's just that it's being diluted by this man's reality. Like there is moments where you're going to see what would appear to be something that would logically happen. But overall, it's the Patrick Bateman show. It's everything that's his eyes and ears perceiving the world.
My perspective on it is I don't think he killed anybody.
Yeah.
But I do think he is very disturbed and has certainly thought about it and played out all those fantasies and drew them all out. Because what the hell does this man actually do at work? But my issue is I think the whole mistaken identity thing feels a little bit too much like a cop-out at the end, because I feel like it's set up to be like, is there really an answer? And I don't know if the movie really has an answer to that question. Who, like, if he's really Bateman or not. And that kind of bothered me. At least that's how I perceived it. But I don't think he killed anybody. I think all that stuff's in his head.
Yeah, like I know, like at the like I know, like when I was giving my thoughts about the movie, I said how like just like a lot of the movie comes down to what's reality and what's not. I mean, I know there are several scenes in this movie that are very obviously in his imagination, but yeah, I mean, like there are some scenes, especially in the end, like even though like we said, the end kind of like overplays the whole, oh, what's real and what's not. I mean, at the same time, the ending is really one of those scenes that really does make you question, like, is like what's happening right now, like in like with him and his lawyer, is this real or is it not?
It was all a dream. Straight up magazine.
Because we don't, because
Wait,
we
what are
love
you,
that
what are
kind
you,
of shit.
what are you rapping right now? Oh, well,
It's a quarter to 11. I don't know what I'm saying.
I feel like, oh, Matt, you give your thoughts on it, and then I feel like I have one last like point that I want to make before we kind of wrap up our conversation.
I mean, it makes sense, Joe, because like Biggie is from New York, so and they are saying New York, but it's just LOL. I think I like Shane. I like what you said, that where it's kind of like whether or not he actually killed people. Like this guy, I don't think anyone is truly ever like lost. It was because of like the job that I have. I can't think of people like that, but I do think that this guy has he definitely needs like some help, and he probably could have done something, because maybe like the killing scenes aren't like, maybe those things didn't happen, but maybe other scenes where it's like he has his receptionist over for like for dinner, and then he kind of like pulls like the nail gun and like almost like shoots her, and then kind of like holds himself back. I feel like there are moments where I think that the those scenes were real and those actually did happen. And if that's the case, yeah, Patrick, you got some problems, man. I can't have you in my Applebee's if you be pulling stuff like that.
Well, you know what I'm thinking now, like that scene when he holds the nail gun to the back of her head, and she she doesn't know that he's behind her. Like that could very well be the movie's way of telling you, yeah, Patrick has these murderous impulses, but he's able to keep them deep down and not act upon them. Therefore, all the other scenes where you see him kill someone, though that's not happening. That's just him thinking about doing it.
The same way I think still, any one of us. Finish that thought, Matt. Sorry.
I was going to say, but even if that's the case, like he still has like a lot of work to do to be kind of like to get better.
Oh right, no, of
because
course.
Like,
I'm just saying.
Shouldn't be, yeah, it's like the line shouldn't be, "I'm good because I didn't kill somebody." It should be like,
right. Yeah, no, I'm not. Yeah, no. Like I agree. I'm just saying what I think.
Bear with this analogy, but it's sort of like when you're in a bad business meeting when you're talking to someone and you're just going, oh, over here so much, but you're not actually going to hang yourself, versus Patrick Bateman, who could probably like actually grab a noose and actually show himself doing that or fixating on that or thinking about that.
That would be his type of humor.
Right. Whereas any one of us would just like, I don't want to be here, and then we'll make a gesture but not actually do it. Whereas Patrick may go the extra step.
And do you think that scene between Christian Bale and Chloe Sevigny in his apartment does really play out? Because like,
yeah,
he's even admitting out loud to her, but she doesn't pick up exactly what he means. But he's being as explicit as he wants to be in terms of like, if you stay here, I'm going to hurt you. Like, literally going to hurt you. And
yeah.
I think she just perceives like he's gonna hurt her emotionally and get involved with her, but like no, he's gonna murder you. And I think he tells her to leave because he knows if she stays any longer, he's not going to be able to hold off on it.
I'm surprised that we did not bring up during this whole podcast his sex scenes where what is he doing when he's having sex with these two? He's flexing. He's staring at himself. He's admiring himself.
I gotta say, there were two scenes I think I remembered from my first watch through of the film. One was him dropping the chainsaw down the stairwell.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, have any of you guys ever operated a chainsaw?
No.
How do you keep it running and take your hand off?
Well, that's another.
Or when it
sign
falls
that
perfectly
didn't
directly on someone.
The other one was Susudio playing and him having a three-way and admiring his muscles in the mirror. That was classic.
Well, to the chainsaw thing, to add to the whole fantasy of it, I think by showing him draw it out on the placemat really shows that that's the fantasy part of it. That's him imagining it because he's drawing it out and on his
Yeah, just middle of the restaurant. Let's just draw that out.
Like
Also,
imagine being in
wild stuff,
Carlucci's
too.
or like those Italian restaurants with the paper with the crayons. Look, Mom, look what I drew.
Murder.
Some pretty wild stuff too. And he's like when he's like with those two women the first time, and like they wake up in the middle of the night, and he's like, "No, we're not finished yet." And he goes into the drawer and he like pulls out like the hanger or whatever the hell else he's about to do. The second threesome when he's doing whatever the hell he's doing under the cover, it's like, whoa! I never read the book.
And then the next time we see Chloe, she mentions that she wants to get a lawyer. Like you don't need to see it, but it really alludes to the fact that something really
you don't need to read it either. Believe me, Matt. It's not worth it.
Gotcha.
Look, can I say I thought I don't know, maybe the last note here when he's talking to his lawyer at the end, right? And his lawyer insists that Owen. What was the name they used in the movie?
Paul Allen.
He insists that Paul Allen is in London. I thought this was just another case of mistaken identity because all these nameless investment bankers or traders or whoever, they don't know each other. They call each other by the wrong names the whole movie.
Like Patrick Bateman, they thought Patrick was someone else.
Davis.
That's a good point.
So I'm not sold, but you guys make good points for this being for all the murder and cannibalism and etc. being in his head.
The last thing that I wanted to bring up, because this film is in that unique club of the let's idolize the wrong characters in movies club of like this and Jordan Belfort and Fight Club and the Joker, and it's just like that angsty college guy that has American Psycho, Fight Club, all those posters just hanging in his room and stuff like that.
And Bob Marley somewhere too, like for no reason.
You don't even listen to reggae. But like, I just feel like this is definitely one of those characters that have like a warped following. And it's just like kind of messed. Well, not kind of messed up.
Worshipping a character for all the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they don't get it. It's like when people think that like Scarface or Rick from Rick and Morty or
I was just gonna say Rick Sanchez.
Yeah, it's like, oh wait, no, wait. You
Tony
should
Soprano.
Rewatch. Yeah, you should like rewatch what you're idolizing. You're not getting it.
You had your feelings about this movie. I have those same feelings about the movie Scarface. Like, I hate that movie. Like,
interesting.
Yeah, and despite the fact, and along with the fact that like watching Al Pacino try to be a Cuban in a movie was just like uncomfortable to watch.
What do you guys think about them remaking Scarface, but in the same way Scarface was a remake of a movie from the 30s? They're gonna try to make it a remake of the same concept of what the 30s was doing. What do you guys think of that?
Isn't Taylor Lautner supposed to be Scarface in the remake?
Taylor?
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my god.
I mean, are we talking about Scarface babies? Like
Taylor Lautner is probably like 30-something at this
Yeah.
point.
I don't know. He's still Jacob.
I was trying to think of something really silly.
But I guess so. Next month we're gonna watch American Psycho 2, right?
Yeah.
No, we are not. But this was definitely
American Psychos. What an ass.
Yes.
We're gonna watch Seven Psychopaths, which I do absolutely love that movie. No, so wrapping up this very spirited and very interesting conversation about one very twisted character and movie. Next month, we're going to be dealing with some equally unstable people, just in a little bit of different context, as we're going to watch Amadeus.
Oh my God. Between Patrick Bateman and Salieri, they are almost the same character. If you really think about it.
Jealous of others.
Oh man.
I don't know if I'd go as far as saying they're the same character, but they
Not
do
the
have similar
same.
energy.
Similar
Like one of those
similar
thumbnails
energy.
with like the red arrow and the circles, you know what I mean? Like
But Joe, Vinny, Jim, Matt, and Shane all thank you for always tuning in and supporting the Development Hell podcast.